Hey guys, welcome back to season 2 of College Football Coast to Coast. I am your co-host Jacob, along with my other co-host Tyler. So season 1 we wrapped up. Kind of jumped into a little bit of basketball there at the end, but we're back for the regular football content for college football, and we're excited for the upcoming season. A lot to come this season. So I mean, a lot of storylines that have already opened up this season. Uh, we have a lot going on outside of the show as well. We've collaborated with a couple of friends, a couple of Tyler's old roommates, and we have made our Sports Scramble podcast network together. So it's us, our Sports Scramble show, and then also Southeast Sports Talk, which Tyler and Wade do host as well. But we're here to talk about college football in its entirety. So we'll jump right in. Uh, First off, Tyler, long off season, man. I said it felt like forever uh, until we started back for college football. But hey, we're going to talk about week 0 coming in.
Yeah, I'm happy to be back. I've just honestly was just looking at our Facebook page, and our last one was talking about March Madness, which I left that in the door since I picked Kentucky as my national champion. They lost to eventual Cinderella story St. Peter's, but it's definitely good to be back talking college football. It's now game week. We'll have week 0 games. You see down there on the bottom of your screen, Nebraska versus Northwestern and Vanderbilt versus Hawaii. So we'll get a little bit of taste of what we're going to see this season, and then next week all of it will unleash. So I'm definitely happy to be back with you.
Yeah, yeah. And for those, a little background, those watching on Facebook, we are having this is our first episode on Facebook that we're doing on our page. So we'll have that as well, and then you can tune on to our regular show. Uh, you'll tune into the audio show and everything on your other platforms on Apple Podcast and Spotify and wherever you get your podcast at. But Tyler, we'll jump right in. It's our first game for week 0 over there across the pond is between Nebraska and Northwestern. Nebraska's that 13-point opening favorite right there. A lot of talk about what was going to happen in Nebraska over the next couple of years. Kind of made some coaching changes a couple of years ago. Things didn't pan out. It was little by little working their way back into the Big Ten, back into the noise a little bit. Because for a long time, Nebraska was kind of the lead dog in the Big Ten. And things dropped off for a long time, but it seems like they're back to play a week 0 game against a fiery Northwestern team. So I don't know what you think is going to happen in this game. You know, it's kind of a tune-up game, I guess, for the season. It does count, but you know, if you're Nebraska, what do you do going into this game? I mean, you haven't seen this team this year. What's the best way to execute, you know, a win uh, in a place where you're just not used to playing it?
Yeah, I expect both of these offenses to really get off to a slow start. Nebraska has a lot of hype going into the season. Scott Frost, the past couple of years just haven't really been, what Nebraska fans really want. It was a 3-9 season. They played Oklahoma really well, and they'll have Oklahoma at home in Lincoln Memorial Stadium with a lot of Big Red Nation there for you. But this is going to be an interesting road trip. Like you said, both teams have to travel across the pond and play in Dublin, Ireland. So this is going to be, something different that these college kids haven't been before. I'm sure hardly any of them have been across the country. So I think that you see there that Nebraska is a 13-point favorite. I'm probably leaning towards that. I just don't think that this Northwestern team is going to be able to handle this veteran bunch of Nebraska. Nebraska, I feel like, is going to have an explosive offense. The defense is definitely going to pick it up as well. So I think that Nebraska – this is probably going to be a low-scoring game in the first half just because this is the first game of the new season, and both offenses are going to be in their kinks, and then the defense will be as well. So it could be a little bit of low-scoring going into the first half. I wouldn't really be surprised if it was like 10-7 going into the half, but I would have Nebraska winning this game pretty handily. I think I would say 35-17, they get the job done.
Yeah, I mean, your over under along with your line, you know, your line's there at 13. Your over under is at 50.5. So
Jeez.
that's really high for a week 0 game, especially in Ireland. So I mean, I've seen the games in Ireland before. I think the way to execute a game like that is start on the ground game, get the ground game going, and I know Nebraska's that's kind of been their one-dimensional side of things where all they've been able to do is run the ball, which it might work out for them this year just based on how they finished last year. They lost the last 5 games of the year last year, all tough opponents. I mean, at home against Iowa, and then you're on the road, Wisconsin, at home against Ohio State, at home against Purdue, and then you go to Minnesota to finish it out. That's a long and tough end of the season for them. So I expect them to bounce back here and get a win. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be as high scoring as they say it is. I think it'll probably be a 28-14 game, pretty close to what you were saying. So I think that's probably my best guess at that game. But our other game on the table, heading the other direction, on the other side of the world, uh, is going to be Vanderbilt at Hawaii. An interesting game. I saw when we saw this pop up, we kind of looked at each other and was like, "That's a little strange." Uh, I don't know how well Vanderbilt's going to travel to a place like Hawaii. They haven't been good for a very long time. I don't expect them to be any better than the past. Hawaii's a so-so team. Uh, it definitely plays in their hands. Absolutely, they don't have to go anywhere. So I think Hawaii takes care of this game pretty easily. I still think Vandy's at the bottom of the leaderboard when it comes to the SEC. So I got to go with Hawaii in this one. I think it's going to be a blowout in that sense. I think it's probably I think it's a 35-7 game at the end of it, just because of the environment and travel and things. I think Hawaii's more prepared and better ready for a win there.
I really haven't seen an SEC team go all the way out to Hawaii. So this has got to be the first time in school history and also SEC history. But yeah, like you mentioned, that this is going to be a tough environment for Vanderbilt to go. They're going from Nashville to Honolulu, Hawaii. But I mean, it's not like Hawaii's like any better than Vanderbilt. I just think it's just going to be a tough road trip. You look at the line there, Vanderbilt is almost a touchdown favorite, 6.5. I think that's probably going to go down. I think a lot of bettors in Vegas is going to get around this Hawaii team. I just expect this one to be an ugly ball game. I mean, we saw what Vanderbilt and Clark Lee did in his first year. It wasn't great. It's probably going to be another 3-win season for them as well. Hawaii, the Mountain West is really loaded. I think the Mountain West, I think a lot of people are really discrediting that conference. I mean, you'll have 3 teams at the top there with Fresno State, Air Force, and then Boise State. That will pretty much be your 3 main teams there. So Hawaii, I look to be as one of those bottom teams there or in the middle. Hawaii always really historic program in football. And I mean, going all the way back to that 2008 there with Colt Brennan, they went undefeated, faced Georgia. They got exposed in that game in the Sugar Bowl. Like Georgia won like 45-10, but I think they're going to really match well against Vanderbilt. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. Both of these offenses really isn't flashy to me, so I think it's going to be more of a defensive battle. So I'm going to go Hawaii 21-14. I think it's going to be a close game. I don't think it's going to be quite of a blowout, but I think it's going to be one of those grinded-out games in Hawaii. Got to give it to the home team. So I'm going to go Rainbow Warriors. Why not? Why not? I'm not even going to call this an upset. I mean, you could say there like the line is there, but I really wouldn't call this an upset on paper.
Yeah, I find it strange that the line is at 6.5
Yeah.
points for Vandy, especially after
I'm surprised.
making.
I thought at least be like 3 points to Vandy, maybe even like a favorite. But you look at FPI on ESPN here, and it's 72% to Hawaii. So the line and the FPI are definitely in disagreement here in week 0.
Yeah, and it's really early for something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just don't. I mean, if it was going to be anything, I thought it was either going to be an even or potentially 3 points to Hawaii, but 6.5 to Vandy's a lot to ask for. I get there in the SEC, but there's not much there for them. So, yeah, I mean that's all that we're going to spend talking about
Yeah.
our 2 games in week 0. There isn't much going on in week
Yeah.
0 aside
I
from
mean,
that.
I'll even read it out to you. Other notable games are, Austin Peay, Western Kentucky, Idaho State, UNLV. UConn versus Utah State, Wyoming, Illinois. I mean, you could just see it. It's pretty much all these Power Five and Group of Five schools really playing cupcake games. That Nebraska versus Northwestern game, and then Vanderbilt, Hawaii. But Week 1's got a lot of firepower, so we'll definitely get into that on the next episode next week.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, we'll dive straight into Week 1 next week. But for this week, staying on where we are, the AP Top 25 came out the other day, and kind of both of us kind of looked at it and said, okay, 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 no, that's not right. Okay. So it was interesting. Some of those teams that we saw on the leaderboard, to start the year and where they stood based on last year. And some of it's predicated on, uh, additions that have been made to teams and coaching staffs and things like that. And some of them have just been blatantly terrible. In my opinion, I think they're asking a lot from some of these teams to be put them in the top 20, 15, whatever that may be. It's a head scratcher. So we'll dive into it. Of course, you lead off. Alabama's your number one team in the country once again. Ohio State at 2, and Georgia at 3, and Clemson at 4. So those are your top 4 teams. Are you okay with that order?
I think I'm pretty much okay with it. I know I hinted at this on the Sports Grill podcast that will be coming out either today or tomorrow. That I hinted that Utah, I understand that they're at 7, but I just think that they're a better football team overall than Clemson. Clemson, I'm sure we'll get to them. We'll talk about them throughout the season as they try to go. They're in the post of Venables there. Brett Venables is no longer their defensive coordinator. He moved on to be the head coach for Oklahoma, and they also lost their offensive coordinator. So this is going to be new management. I mean, Dabo did a terrific job of his hires, but we're just going to have to see. I mean, like you mentioned on one of our other shows, is that Venables is the energy guy. So where is Clemson, this team, going to get the energy from? I was just really impressed with Utah. I mean, we know on season 1 of this show that Jacob was a big influencer of my picks in the Rose Bowl. We both went with Utah. It ultimately didn't work out, but the way that team was able to battle that whole entire game against one of the best and most talented teams in the country with Ohio State, I think that this Utah team, I mean, we're seeing in the Pac-12 like, oh, USC this, USC that, but I mean, this Utah team I know has a tough challenge there at the Swamp, have to go on the road to face Florida, but if they win that one, their schedule really sets up nicely, and I think that both we could see Utah and USC in the Pac-12 championship, maybe against an Oregon.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's a big possibility. Yeah, I'm okay with the top 4. It's all right. I don't know if I would put Clemson at 4. That's kind of a huge jump
Yeah.
based on how they finished last year. Yeah, I mean, they've got a lot of coaching changes that have been made there, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens this year. So I'm kind of iffy with them in the 4th spot there. I could agree with you, and I would have put Utah there at 4 or potentially 5. I don't know how I feel about Michigan at 8. Uh, Kind of strange for them at 8. Uh, but I'm okay with the other teams there in the top 10 at that point. But some of the stuff that I'm kind of scratching my head at, yeah, Utah there, and I'm also scratching my head at Miami, where they're at on the AP poll. I mean, I thought if they were going to put Miami in there, they wouldn't be any higher than 20. I mean, they're up there a ways. So I'm kind of scratching my head in the sense that why do we have a team that struggled the last couple of years uh, so high up? They haven't proven themselves. I mean, they've made some coaching changes. Same with USC. I
Yeah.
mean, they've added Lincoln Riley. You've got a few guys that have committed and recruited and changed over. Caleb Williams, is transferred over there with Lincoln Riley. So, I mean, they have a guy who's seasoned enough at quarterback there. But aside from that, I don't know why they're that high. And stuff, might play out, and we see something where it's like, hey, stuff fell into place eventually after 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Because ultimately, the AP poll doesn't matter at the end of the day. It's just shaping up for when the playoff poll comes out and where teams stand for bowl season and things like that. But yeah, I'm kind of baffled by that. But speaking of the conference, and we get to the end and talking about bowl games, uh, conference championship lines are out. I know we have talked a lot about that lately and about what we're gonna do as far as that goes, because folks, there is big money in conference championship picks. If you are old enough to bet and you want to go test your luck at something involving football and specifically college football, it would be picking conference championships. So it's probably your best odds. I mean, sure, you win a game every now and then with lines and everything, but uh, when you're doing 7, 8 game conference champion parlays, it's a lot. So we're gonna kind of run through our conference championship picks and who we think's gonna represent each conference, and some of those big conferences go on to represent in the playoff, which we'll get to that in a little bit. But we'll run through our conference champions, and I guess we'll start with the ACC, Tyler.
Hey, going back to season one, Jacob nailed it on the head. He said literally week one, I kid you not, that Wake Forest and Pittsburgh was going to be in the ACC championship. And guess what happened? It happened. So let's see if he can nail it again. So I'll start in the Atlantic. I know we deep dived into this, so I really won't get into it. I said NC State back on our episode with the Sports Scramble, but the more I'm looking at this Clemson team, I think I'm going to change my pick, go with Clemson. I just think with this game being at Clemson, that's just going to be too hard of an environment for NC State to handle. I know that NC State got the job done at home, but it's a different environment there at Clemson Memorial Stadium. So I got to go with the Clemson Tigers. I know that it's going to come down between Clemson and NC State. Devin Leary, his experienced quarterback, DJ Ucla as well. I believe he's in his third year there with Clemson, but I just think my really main question is for Clemson is how's the defense going to be without Brent Venables, because that man's literally been there for as long as I can remember, since his Oklahoma days whenever he was a defensive coordinator. Now he's the head coach. The Coastal is pretty much a toss-up for me, but I know that you really don't have any faith in Miami, but I do. I think that Tyler Van Dyke is going to get the job done there for the Hurricanes, but that won't matter. I have Clemson winning the ACC and reclaiming their throne there for the ACC conference.
Yeah, I mean, my picks haven't changed too much in the ACC. I kind of keep it simple, stupid there. But I think in the Atlantic, I'm going to stay with NC State. I know I picked them originally, and I'm going to stay with them. I think one game could swing the balance there between that Clemson and NC State game. Definitely will be the outcome. I think whatever outcome of that is who's going to represent the Atlantic right there. Wake Forest had a good year last year. They start the year at 23, I think, in the AP poll. NC State, they're in the teens there. So I mean, it really is up to what happens in that game. I think between NC State and Clemson, and I think crazy things have happened, and I think a crazy thing could happen again. I think NC State figured out Clemson. I think they figured them out last year, and sure, were they down a couple of guys and things were a little bit crazy. I still think that I'm going to roll with NC State. I have belief in them and in that coaching staff, and especially that quarterback play with Leary. But in the Coastal, it's kind of it's an I don't know. I don't think Pittsburgh's going to return to be who they are without Kenny Pickett. I think they probably finish second or third in the division there. I I can't go with Miami. I just can't. Something tells me that that's not going to work. So I said to myself, I'm going to roll with UNC. I'm going to roll with the Tar Heels. No, we're not talking basketball. We're talking football. So I'm going to roll with NC State in North Carolina to represent their schools in North Carolina, in Charlotte, for the ACC championship. So an all Carolina
Yeah.
final in Carolina.
Dude, that would sell a lot of tickets in that stadium. That stadium would be sold out if that matchup were to happen. For sure, that would be the battle of North Carolina and the state of North Carolina right
There
there.
would be a lot of I feel like there would be a lot of brawls outside the stadium or in the concourse. Like, man, you better bring, like, a bulletproof vest to that game because the people are just gonna be wailing on each other, uh, there. So, I mean, that as much as the Clemson and NC State games would be crazy is gonna be crazy, NC State and UNC game would be wild, and, that'd be a heck of a matchup, especially for, uh, the stakes as high as that. But moving on to our next conference, uh, Tyler, let's go to the Big 12.
Man, this I think this is one of the most wide open conferences. Usually in the past, this has been Oklahoma's conference to run away with. We saw Baylor winning it with Dave Aranda there. There's a lot of preseason hype with Baylor. They're right on the top 10 line. They're number 10, but I just don't really see it. They did lose a lot of key pieces on the offensive side. They lost Abram Smith, their star running back. They lost a lot of key guys. Petrie, one of their quarterbacks as well. So I don't know if Baylor is going to. That's probably like a 9-win season. I'm feeling for Baylor, but in the end, I think it's going to be Bedlam in Arlington, Texas. I think it's going to be Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. So literally, they're going to play in the last week of the regular season and then turn around and play again. So I think it's going to be obviously the game this year is going to be in Norman. The game last year was hectic. That was actually Lincoln Riley's last head coaching experience for the Oklahoma Sooners. So I think Oklahoma State's one of the most veteran really returning teams. They have Spencer Sanders returning back. They have a lot of weapons on both sides of the ball. They did lose Jared Bernard Converse to LSU. He decided to use his grad transfer to play for his hometown state. But I think that I went with Oklahoma. I still have faith in this Oklahoma team. I know that no longer Lincoln Riley, so the offense may look different, but no longer Caleb Williams there, but they did add UCF transfer Dylan Gabriel, so I don't think this offense is really going to skip a beat this year. I know I said Oklahoma in the previous show, but I think I'm going to have more faith in Oklahoma State. I'm going to go with the Gundy here, go with the Gundy man here. I think that Oklahoma State, they lost a heartbreaker last year in Baylor. We know that last play, the running back dived, but it got stopped there at the 1 yard line. It was Baylor, showing off we want the rings. So I think it's going to be this year. I think Oklahoma State, they've really thought about that game. This is going to be their revenge tour. So give me the Pokes winning it this season.
Yeah, that's a great pick, I think. Yeah, Oklahoma, I don't think is who their
Yeah.
their past has been. I don't think by any means it's going to look even remotely the same. If I watch an Oklahoma game, I'll be able to tell. I'll be like, man, this is different. I feel like, but teams that have been talked about recently. I know you probably think I'm going to bring it up, which I am, and that's Texas. The Longhorns have made a lot of additions and a lot of changes, especially, you know, trying to figure out quarterback, who's going to lead that offense. It's a lot of hype around what's going to happen in the future with Texas and Oklahoma and where they're going to go. And we'll have a dedicated part of a show to those two teams and their addition to the SEC. But for now, for this year, they stay in the Big 12. So I feel like, your teams like Kansas. Kansas is not going to compete for anything. I know they won't.
They can. Hey,
Uh,
they won their big dance. They won the national championship against North Carolina in basketball. So I don't think Kansas is too worried about football right now.
I don't think so either. As far as West Virginia goes, you got your transfer. You got your transfer at quarterback. That's what you wanted. Kind of a strange transfer, though.
Yeah, I know, going from Georgia to West Virginia, and then you're
Yes.
doing like his "Let's ride,
Yeah.
Mountaineer Nation, let's ride."
The spinoff of the Russell Wilson
Yes, a
thing
lot
there
of
in
spinoffs
Denver.
from that.
Yeah. So I think West Virginia gets a little better year this year, uh, based on the changes that they've made to their offense. Defense has always been good for them. Their game last year at Oklahoma, that was a battle. I
Yeah,
watched that game. That was a great game last year. I still remember that. Um, no, but I agree with you. Oklahoma State, I think, is too powerful on offense. They're that original air raid offense team that I love to watch. They throw it, they air it out there, and just hope it lands in somebody's hands. So it would be a heck of a game to go watch out there in Stillwater. So it was a great team last year. I think they roll over and continue into this year. As far as Baylor goes, I think Baylor is probably my team to go back. I think it's a rematch in this game for the Big 12 title. Those two teams are seasoned; they're ready to go. Baylor has energy for days. They are always healthy, ready to go. Their pressure on the defensive line is strong. Secondary plays amazing. Uh, their defense is what's won them a lot of games. I mean, I think they were the number one team in the Big 12 last season in defensive touchdowns. They just they took the ball from everybody, and props to them. I think they're going to have another great season this year. And I'm going to take Baylor again this year. I think they're my pick to go back and repeat for a Big 12 title.
All right.
So on to our next big conference, and that's going to be the Pac-12, kind of big-ish. So pieces that have decided that they're going to be moving on after this year. That would be UCLA and USC. Folks, yes, they're going. If you haven't heard already, which if you haven't, then you need to open your ears, but they will be going to the Big Ten next year. They will be joining the Big Ten. So it's going to be a long flight for those Big Ten teams heading out there. But for now, USC and UCLA will stay there in the Pac-12 for one more year, and we'll see what happens. So, Tyler, who do you see? Leading. A lot's happened there, especially in the Pac-12, where teams have guys not only like they're not changing conferences. It's more of a lot of people are changing teams within the conference, and I've seen a lot of that lately, especially in the Pac-12. I don't know if it's belief in certain coaching staffs or what it may be, uh, but who's that team from last year that we saw that hey, really wasn't a competitor that could be one again this year?
It's hard to really say that in the Pac-12. I just think that the top two teams this year is USC and Utah this year. I know that Oregon is a top 15 team. They're ranked number 11 right now. I'm also noticing that there's no more divisions in the Pac-12. I don't know if that's correct or not. Is
That
that
is
correct?
correct.
Okay,
That is
so I
correct.
guess it's just going to be the two best teams dueling it out there in Las Vegas. So I think that's a pretty easy pick for me to just go with the two heavy favorites in Utah and USC. I think they both meet in Las Vegas. I mean, like I just mentioned, I'm going to go with Utah. I think I'm just really high on this team going into this year. I think that they could definitely be on the front door of either going to another Rose Bowl game or going to, their first ever college football playoff appearance. I mean, Utah has been one of those teams in the past, going back to like that same like 2008, 2009 season. Well, I don't think it was 2009 because Alabama won the Sugar Bowl. It was one of those years like Utah beat Alabama back then. So, I mean, this Utah team, going back to that Rose Bowl game, just the dominating defense, a brand that they have really been working on under their really talented head coach. I think that the offense is going to be as talented as ever. They showcase that in the back half of their schedule, especially against Oregon and then Ohio State. I think that USC, there's definitely a belief in the hype. I definitely think this is going to be a revamped team. I could see this either a 10-win, 11-win, or maybe possibly an undefeated season if they can beat Utah in the regular season. But even if USC beats Utah, I think that Utah comes back and slams the door on them in the Pac-12 championship. But I think if you're looking to answer your question, if you're looking for a team to really say like who could, be a dark horse, maybe it could be a Washington. I don't know, because Arizona State lost Jaden Daniels. I just don't think that they're going to be great anymore. Lost a terrific quarterback. Colorado, I just don't really believe in them. Arizona, Cal, they haven't really been good. So there's not really a team. UCLA maybe they beat LSU in that statement game week 1, and then they lose to Fresno State, and we really didn't even see about them. So there's definitely a lot of key guys returning on that offense. So I think some dark horse team, I would look out for Washington.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's an interesting pick. Yeah, I think the days of Washington are over. Their days
Yeah.
are numbered, I think, to begin with. But my team, as far as the team that could be. I don't think they're going to compete for a conference championship, but I think they're
Mhm.
going to have a better year and could be in that third spot. I think is Stanford. We saw them get a big win last year, so against Oregon, that was a heck of a game. That was wild. Great win for them. Then Oregon kind of fell off. Yeah, and I don't know if they're going to return to be what they were. It just seems like a long shot there. So in
I mean, they
Colorado,
played Georgia week 1, so it is
yeah,
not going to be easy out the gates.
yeah, we're really going to see who Oregon is right out the gate at week 1. You're right. Yeah, and I think Colorado. I like Colorado's style of play. They're kind of a ground and pound team, which I like. I think they're coached well. They keep games close. I
I mean,
never see
shoot,
Colorado.
they showed it in the game in Denver against Texas A&M last year. I mean, that game was 7-0, and then it was in the end it was 10-7. Texas A&M Isaiah Spiller ended up scoring a late touchdown, but Colorado can play some defense, and they showed it in that game against a
Absolutely.
really high-powered SEC team in A&M.
Yeah, I mean they keep every game close. Yeah, it's weird. I haven't seen them get blown out in a very long time. So I think they'll be there at the end, potentially close to that 25 mark in the AP poll. I see them maybe staying there. So I still think they'll have a good year, and I think they'll get a bowl game at the end of the year. Uh, but no, I agree with you. I think USC and Utah, I think, are my picks as well for the Pac-12. I think I think I still have more belief in Utah than anybody. So they're kind of the team that I feel most confident in. I think out of every conference except for the SEC on who's going to win that title, and that's Utah. I think they have the pieces. Cam Rising returns this year, so he's hopefully going to have a great bounce back season. You know, he left the Pac 12 championship injured and did not return to that game to end the year. And I'm sure he's ready to go, especially since a lot of spotlights on USC. And I'm sure he is ready to face them in a Pac 12 championship game one last time. Uh, I think I'll get to more of Cam Rising when I get to my Heisman area because he's high on my list, especially. Man's got the flow. Let me tell you what, that man's he brought the mullet back before the mullet was back. So I he's a fiery guy too. He gets in there and mixes it up, and he's one of those guys. He is not going to slide. He's going to take a big hit if he rolls out of the pocket and he wants to run with it. I mean, that's ultimately how he got hurt. But he is as tough as nails. So I think Utah is going to be there and win the Pac-12 for me. Uh, Moving on to our second to last Power Five, and that would be the Big Ten. You had mentioned just a minute ago what happened to the divisions in the Pac-12. Where'd they go? And, they put them all together, and I think that's probably what's going to come to here soon in the Big Ten, especially with the additions of USC and UCLA in the future for next season. I think that is ultimately the best way to go about it because right now it's tough because it seems like the East is just way overpowered and the West just doesn't have much of anything. And the Big Ten championship games end up being blowouts and they're not close at all. So as far as the Big Ten goes, I'll lead off, I guess, and I'll let you know my East first, which is kind of the big piece of the Big Ten. It's kind of the Big Ten. So I think it comes down to the end of the season where it's Ohio State and Penn State battling it out 1 and 2. For the East, I think Ohio State probably is that team that represents the East, unless something crazy happens like 2015 all over again. But I think Ohio State's there. I think they get that one big win uh, ahead of Penn State in order to get vaulted in there to ultimately face the West team, which I think is probably going to be Iowa. I think Iowa and Purdue are going to battle that one out. I love Purdue. Don't get me wrong. Purdue's a great team. Crazy, fast, aggressive. Throws everybody off guard. So I think I'm going to go with Iowa, though. They're kind of the trusty rusty right there in the West. So I'm going to run with them, and of course I've got Ohio State winning and a blowout there for the Big Ten championship in Indianapolis.
Yeah, I as well will start in the East. I mean, I think that there's going to be ultimately three teams battling it out for the top spot. That's going to be Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State. I definitely think that Penn State, I do have them winning on the road at Auburn. I just don't really believe in Auburn, especially with the off-field antics. And it sounds like more and more that they're rolling with TJ Finley. I just don't think that TJ Finley's been the guy. He showed a little bit of sparks during his LSU days during the 2020 season, but it's just not going to be the quarterback of the future for Auburn. But the defense will definitely be there for them. But I think ultimately it will come down between the game. I think both Michigan and Ohio State will go into that matchup both undefeated. It's going to be another top 5 battle. But just the pure talent that Ohio State is bringing back this year is just going to make me vote them over Michigan, and they're going to want payback for what Michigan did at the Big House last season. It was ultimately embarrassing for Ohio State. Ohio State's defense just got run over by Hassan Haskins. I think I don't even remember how many times. I lost track of how many times Gus Johnson said, Hassan Haskins, there he goes. So I don't know if that's going to happen this year. Obviously not, because Hassan Haskins is on the Tennessee Titans now. But Caden McNamara returning, definitely a lot of experience. You obviously lose Aiden Hutchinson, but still worthy of a top 10 team there. As you can see on the bottom of the screen, they're at number 8. But I think they fall all the way at the end of the season to the top 5. This will be like a 2 versus 4 matchup. But in the end, of Ohio State, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and C.J. Stroud. Those are going to be 2 names on the Heisman Award watch list here in the preseason. So I think that Ohio State gets their revenge and then wins the Big Ten East. On the West, I mean, the West is pretty much wide open. I can see even like teams like Minnesota and Nebraska winning this division. But I'm going to go with Purdue. I just think that the 6th year is really going to help Aiden O'Connell. They do lose their key guy on defense, George Karlaftis. He's now in the Kansas City Chiefs. Lost David Bell. He went to the NFL draft as well. So there's going to be a lot of key pieces, but I really like their schedule. They don't have Ohio State this year. They play the majority of their big games at home. I believe their only road trip is either Wisconsin or Iowa. It's either one of those opponents. But other than that, I think their schedule really sets up nicely. I think this could be a potential 9-win season. I think that 9 wins is going to be enough to win the Big Ten West. I just think that the West teams are just going to beat up on each other like they did last year. So I'm going to have Purdue and Ohio State. But like you said, if you match up Purdue versus Ohio State, that's going to be a blowout. So I think that Ohio State on neutral field wins. And I think that's pretty much – I think, honestly, other than the SEC, maybe this is probably the easiest pick for me, going with Ohio State.
Yeah, I think, there with Purdue, staying there for a second. Yeah, their one big road game there is at Wisconsin in Madison.
Okay.
That's going to be a tough game.
Yeah, it is.
I don't think they win that game. And then you got to go back home and play Iowa the next week. That's a really tough
That's
game.
going to be a crucial part with Wisconsin and Iowa. And they do open their season up at home against Penn State. So if they don't win that, they're already going to be behind, the likes of Wisconsin, Iowa, teams at the top that are going to be competing. So I think whoever wins that game, we're going to be looking, in the midseason, like Penn State, if they win that one, they could be a team, that's undefeated. That's going to be a lot of experience on that team. So Penn State has also got a lot of good opponents as well. I think their really only hard road game is obviously the Auburn game. That's always a tough environment to go to, but they do have to face Michigan on the road, but they do get Ohio State at home, and then they get Michigan State at home as well. So I think their schedule also pretty much sets up nicely as well. So that could be a team that could sneak up into the top 10 before you know it.
Sure, definitely. Yeah, I mean, they're a sneaky team. James Franklin there has them ready to go, I think. And there's a lot of – I talked about this in our other show that'll be coming out in the next day or so, about how ready that university is for a young freshman wave to come in and take over there. I know Sean Clifford's been there a long time. Stuff he's done with the NCAA recently, I am very for in things like that. He's kind of headed a lot of the NIL stuff throughout the country with his own organization leading that charge. But, I think with somebody like Drew Aller coming in, I think the university's ready to go. I think they want to get him in there experienced. He throws that ball so hard. I was watching some, training camp stuff and just absolutely ripping the ball. So I'm excited to see what the future is. Those of you that have watched this show before know that I'm a lifelong Penn State fan, and I'll be there watching them every Saturday, regardless of how the season goes. So no, I hope it's a good year. Fortunately, I won't be at the Auburn game this year in Jordan Hare. I know I'm close to that area, closer to that area, but tickets are too expensive.
Yeah.
Number one,
In SEC country, tickets, you could pretty much double that. I mean, yeah,
yeah,
I think that's Auburn's biggest home game of the year because they faced Alabama in the Iron Bowl last season. I don't know if they faced Georgia at home or not, but I mean, I think that Auburn fans just don't even want to go to that game. It's just going to be a blowout.
yeah, I think they want to get their revenue, and I
Yeah.
think they want payback at the end of the
Yes.
day for playing in the whiteout last year, early whiteout last year. Uh, but this year you go back and it's against an interesting opponent in Minnesota. Kind of an odd game there. You turn
I
around
mean,
and
Minnesota's going to be no slouch, though. Tanner Morgan's also another, I think, either fifth year or 6 years. That man's been there for who knows how long. I think, man, the Big Ten is just like 6 year conference. You have Sean Clifford coming back. You have O'Connell of Purdue coming back. I don't know how many years Peyton Thorne has been there. I think that is he still a young quarterback or is he like a junior?
I think he's a junior quarterback this
Okay.
year. Uh, I don't think he played his senior year. I can't remember who was at quarterback, but I think he's a junior. But yeah, there's a lot of veteran quarterbacks in the Big Ten, and it'll be exciting to see what happens there. But I think the young quarterback era in the Big Ten is going to be what drives it, and we've kind of seen that with what Ohio State's done with C.J. Stroud. Uh, so I think it's time for some young blood to come in and take over the Big Ten. Uh, but our last major conference that we'll get to is the SEC, the boys down south. And of course, Tyler here is on Southeast Sports Talk, and that is kind of his wheelhouse. So I will let Tyler lead it off here. I know we've talked about this in the last day
Yes.
or so and what we think's going to happen here, and to no surprise, I
Yeah. Yeah, no surprise at all. I mean, I'm just gonna go say right now, it's gonna be Alabama, Georgia. I mean, there will be teams competing. I just don't like. I'll say like Arkansas. I would say could be up there. Texas A&M, I could see them competing up there just because of their defense. So that they're returning back, and then they do lose some key stars with Isaiah Spiller, but they still have an Ice Smith there in the backfield. He'll replace him. And then obviously their number one recruiting class will boost them. Arkansas is returning talent as well, and the other teams have some question marks. You could say Mississippi State could be a dark horse in the West, just with the explosive offense that they run and the defense. A lot of key returners, like I said on the show yesterday that we recorded. Mississippi State is one of the most veteran bunches, and I mean, veteran. If having that veteran talents can be key in the SEC. I think that LSU versus Mississippi State game could decide, who finishes third in the SEC West. That game's in Baton Rouge, so we've seen Mississippi State go into that hostile environment before. They have done it before just 2 years ago. But in the end, it's going to be Alabama. I can't bet against Nick Saban. That's going to be one of the most loaded teams he has had. Not really many key pieces you're losing. I mean, you did lose John Mechie and Jamison Williams, but all they do at Alabama is just it's no rebuilding years. It's just reload. And they are going to be absolutely loaded at every division, at every position, excuse me. So I'm going to go with Alabama in the West. I'm going to go with Georgia, reigning national champs, one of the best defenses that we have ever seen last year. They did lose N'Kobe Dean and Jordan Davis. They had a lot of draft picks. Let me just tell you that. So that's all I need to know. But like Alabama, Kirby Smart pretty much runs the same program at Alabama. They don't rebuild, they reload, and Georgia will once again be reloaded. I think in the East, you could see teams like Tennessee and Kentucky. I think that's going to be the two teams at the top battling it out for the number 2 spot. Tennessee and Kentucky is also two of the other teams in the conference that is reloaded, especially at the quarterback position. Kentucky has Will Levis, former Penn State product. And then you have Tennessee, Hendon Hooker, former Virginia Tech product. But in the end, you got to go Georgia, Alabama. And I'm going to go Alabama. I think they reclaim. Actually, they're not even reclaiming their throne. They won the SEC title last year, but Georgia won the big dance. But I think Alabama once again wins the SEC championship against Georgia.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you. I'll keep it short there. Yeah, I think Alabama and Georgia face each other again in the SEC championship. I've got Georgia winning though this time for the SEC championship. I think Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs have Nick Saban's number again this year for a second time in a row. Speaking towards the national championship last year, so I think they're my pick to win the SEC and represent the SEC. Ultimately, I think it comes down to yes, we'll probably have two SEC teams in the playoff again this year. Unfortunately, unless something crazy happens, I'm not a big fan of that, and most of our viewers know that I'm not a big fan of having two teams from the same conference in the top four to go to the college football playoff. But we'll get into that. I know you mentioned LSU there with Mississippi State kind of battling it out there in the West. I didn't have Mississippi State doing much this year. Uh, I'm just very iffy. In the past is the past couple of seasons has made me think that way, just because I don't know where they're at football wise and where they're at player wise. I know you know more of that than I do, but it just seems like a long shot to think that there'll be a third place team trying to battle it out. I mean, I will be at that LSU and Mississippi State game, so it'll be a good game. I enjoy going to those games, and I'm sure we'll have a bunch of friends there that will come and join in Baton Rouge for that one. Uh, and you touched on Tennessee. Tennessee is a team that's trying to prove themselves. Uh, and a lot of what we've seen is, well, they could have a 10-win season, and I'm like, wait a second. I said that's a bit interesting. So looking at their schedule, I don't see 10 wins on their schedule. I see maybe 8 there. So that's just my thinking. And looking at their schedule in Tennessee's past, uh, I I like Tennessee. I like the way they move the ball. Yes, Hooker is still there at quarterback. Uh, that'll be a great game too in Baton Rouge. Haven't seen that in a little while. Tennessee LSU. That'll be a great game. I'll be at that game as well. Those are the two games I'll be at. I
This
won't be.
man is just going to be on a stadium tour
I will be on a
this
stadium.
year.
Yeah, so and that'll all be in the middle of while I go back to State College to see Penn State and Michigan State finish the season a couple days after Thanksgiving. So yeah, it'll be wild college football season for me on the road, moving around a little bit. But yeah, I ultimately think that your teams that are going to have down years is Florida, Auburn, Texas A&M was at the bottom of my list for the SEC West, which I know that might surprise a lot of people, but I just don't see it at Texas A&M. I get the recruiting thing, and Jimbo pumps the well, we're going to have the number one recruiting class in the country. Him and Nick Saban throw hissy fits at each other about who's going to win what, and it's just a giant children's fight. So I ultimately think Georgia wins the SEC over Alabama in that big game. Uh, Getting to Power Five, I don't want to run through every Power Five conference, or sorry, Power Five,
Group of five.
Group of Five. Sorry, I don't want to run through every Group of Five conference uh, out there. I kind of want to get your taking on who you think the best 2 or 3 teams are in the Group of Five, and where they, match up at the end of the year and where they might stand.
Well, looking at the group of five right now in the AP poll, you have 23, 24, and 25 represented by that group of five slate. That's Cincinnati. I don't really know about Cincinnati this year. I had to look more into it, but that's a lot of key guys that they're losing. They're pretty much losing a lot, pretty much 75% of their offensive production with Desmond Ritter, Alec Pierce, should I go on and on. They pretty much lose everybody, and then they lose a couple of key guys on the defense. So I think that Cincinnati, there's not going to be an undefeated season. I could see a 9-win season or like a 10-win season for this bunch. Still a talented head coach and staff with Luke Fickell there. So you can't ever bet really against that guy and that coaching staff. You see Houston there. That's probably my pick for the American Conference to take that one along with UCF. And then you see BYU there. They're an independent school. I would have to run through their schedule to see. But I think one of the best group of 5 is going to come from the Mountain West Conference, whether that's Air Force, Fresno State, and I'm going to give it to Air Force. I'm going to go with our troops. I think that Air Force is going to surprise some people. We know they have a real solid defense. I think that Air Force is going to, really have some flash. They're only receiving 4 votes from the AP poll, but as soon as their schedule gets underway, I think that Air Force. I think it's the Mountain West is going to come down between Air Force and Fresno State. Boise State will probably be in the mix, but I think they're a step behind both of those schools. I just think that Air Force and Fresno State's offense is more experienced and more battle tested. So I'm going to go Air Force, going a little surprising pick here. I know that a lot of viewers are probably on like Houston this year to be the group of 5 represented, but I'm going to go Air Force, support the troops.
Yeah, I know I like that pick. Yeah, I don't have too much belief in Boise State. I mean, if I'm going to talk about the Mountain West, my pick's probably going to be Fresno State, just because their season, they know where they stand, and they've statistically finished in the top 25 a lot of seasons and played in some bowl games. So I'm going to roll. I would roll with them in the Mountain West. My other team belongs to Conference USA, and that's going to be kind of an interesting pick, and that's UAB. I think UAB is a team that could prove themselves in that conference there. Not much else going on in that conference besides UTSA, possibly. I know they've competed for a Conference USA title. Was that last year? Had a great season. That was wild that they won double-digit games last year. And Western Kentucky also is a team to look out for as well. Very air raid offense type over there in Western Kentucky. My last team is probably going to be Houston. I think Houston and the American is the team to beat. I don't think Cincinnati is there anymore for me to represent the American. Houston is kind of top dog, I think, right there, or top cat in that division. So in that conference. So I'm going to roll with them there. But moving on from all of that, and it all comes down to at the end of the year, we talk about what, Tyler? The playoff. So the playoff is still consistent of 4 teams again. Uh, Expansion, I know that it's been big talks about expansion and what's going to happen. Where's it going to go? It's going to be 8, 12, however it may be. But as it stands, still 4. What 4 teams do you have representing themselves in the playoff?
Well, you see the top 4 there on the bottom of your screen? Well, that's going to be my top 4 in the playoff. It's going to be one seed. That's probably not a good thing here because the AP poll is usually wrong. But I just think that number 1 seed is going to be Alabama. They're going to go undefeated, win the SEC championship, and claim that number 1 overall seed. Ohio State's going to be doing the same. I think it's going to be either. I could either see Ohio State or Alabama get in this number 1 seed. I would not be shocked if we see Ohio State finish off the season undefeated and then jumping over Alabama for that 1 spot. But I'm just going to go with Ohio State at number 2 seed right now. I'm going to have Georgia at the number 3 seed. The college football playoff is not going to want to see a rematch of Alabama-Georgia the next week, so they'll move. I think that both Georgia and Clemson will be 11-1 anyways at the season. I think that Clemson, if they do lose the game, will be that game against NC State, and that'll ultimately decide the Atlantic Division. But I just think that Georgia and Alabama, I just don't really see it unless like a Tennessee or Kentucky upsets Georgia. That's really the only reason to keep them out, because if Alabama and Georgia are both undefeated going to the SEC championship, it doesn't matter what happens unless like one of the 2 teams, blows someone out, and then a team like Utah or USC makes a move. I just don't see it happening. And I have Clemson. I think that this is either going to be a team that goes undefeated or 11-1. I think that'll be enough. Just depending on, what the Pac-12 champion does or what the Big 12 champion does as well. So those are my top 4. And then the outside looking in is Utah. That's my number 6 team. And then 7, I would have to put Oklahoma State, which I think is going to be the both the Pac-12 champs and the Big 12 champs. I think that those both teams could either be 11-1 or 10-2 at the end of the season.
Yeah, I like 3 of the 4 teams there at the top. The only
I think I already know which one. That's not Clemson.
Yeah, and I don't think Clemson's going to be there. I don't have the belief in Clemson to be there at the fourth spot at the end of the season. I would replace them. I feel better with putting Utah there for now. After
I
week,
almost did too because we know both of us. We might as well be called the Utah Coast to Coast show.
yeah, so we give a lot of love to Utah.
Yes,
But they're a great football team,
we
and I
are.
won't talk much more about them. But yeah, I think they're my team to represent the fourth there. uh, until week one. If they get
They
a win
lose
in
to
Florida,
Florida.
it quite possibly could put them just a little bit higher. Because hey, who's there to say that A&M doesn't lose early on in the season? Who's there to say that Ohio State uh, beats the brakes off of Notre Dame week one? That would move them down immensely. And Clemson's the only one standing in their way. And if Clemson ultimately does lose that game to NC State or loses another game, I think Utah would be the next team in line for me. So I have to put them there. But that's our playoff right there from what we know right now. Season hasn't even started yet.
Nope.
So we'll see how good we
It
are at
will
the end of the
change. I
year.
mean, we'll do
It
another
will
one
change.
in the midseason.
It will change. We'll do a little midseason one as we get deeper in. Last thing we'll talk about here as we come up on the hour mark is Heisman. Who is your early Heisman pick here? I kind of could guess it, but
You can guess. Go ahead.
is it CJ Stroud?
It is CJ Stroud. I think he's. I mean, I know that there's a lot of guys. I'll pretty much say like the top like three guys. It's going to be CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think that a wide receiver finally gets an invite. I don't think there hasn't been many wide receiver invites. It's mainly been a quarterback award. We saw a defensive player last year be able to get it with Aiden Hutchinson, but I just don't think that any. I don't really see not really circling any defensive guys to get an invite this year. I think it's either going to be an offensive, whether that's a quarterback or a receiver. I just think that if I have Ohio State making the playoffs and having a really good year, I think that CJ Stroud is going to have a fantastic year. I wish you could give the trophy to both Jackson Smith and Jigba because he's going to be the next best Ohio State receiver. We see guys like Michael Thomas already in the league, whatever he's doing. Chris Olave, he's drafted. So I guess I mean I wouldn't be surprised if we see Jackson Smith and Jigba in the black and gold uniform. I know that he's going to be a top 5 pick though, so that probably won't happen unless the Saints ultimately implode this season. But I'm going to go a little sneaky pick here. I think Stetson Bennett could get an invite, the quarterback from Georgia. He showed it what he could do last season with the Dogs. I think he's going to be the focal point of the offense with Zamir White and James Cook leaving for the draft. So I think that whatever the performance he showed me against Alabama national championship game, I think you're going to see more of that this year. So I think I could see a sleeper pick of Stetson Bennett get an invite and possibly could win it, especially if Georgia, like your pick says. I think if Georgia wins the SEC championship against Alabama, that could definitely be a de facto. Could it either be a guy like CJ Stroud or could it be Stetson Bennett?
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. My number one pick is probably Cam Rising. It depends on how the season goes, the end of the season goes. But no, I agree with you. I think Bryce Young will be there at the end once again, and I think CJ Stroud will also be there. Like I honestly think this year is probably the all quarterbacks
Yeah.
again, uh, just because that's statistically what has happened a lot in the past. Leaders of the offense. So those are my 3 picks to represent their schools for the Heisman. I don't see that changing too much. But guys, that'll wrap up our week 0 show, our preview for the season and what's to come. So we'll see what happens here. We'll be back next week for our second episode of season 2. So circle your calendar for the next episode, and we will see you guys then. Thank you so much for tuning in, and everyone have a good rest of their day and their evening.